Pretty bad traffic.
You just have that magnetic.
Gotcha. Okay. It's okay.
It's a good thing. Shana Tova, everyone. We're
Shana
going
Tova.
to begin our Erev Rosh Hashanah service with some music. Then we'll chat a little, we'll do some prayers, and we'll really try to embrace the fact that the Jewish New Year begins really here and now. So, Hannah, you'll lead us in Kine Mato, a song that reminds us how good it is to be together.
Behold how great it is that we can be happily together. Whoa, whoa. Behold how great. Behold how great it is that we can be happily together.
Mind just introducing yourself so that way everyone knows. I'm guessing more people know you than me.
Hi, my name is Hannah Marcus. I use she, they pronouns, and I am currently a senior at Emory University. I'm studying statistics and women and gender studies. Ask me about it, it's a really cool combo. And I'm the vice president of Emory Hillel this year. I also usually lead our reform services on Friday nights. So if you like what you hear tonight, please feel free to come on Friday night. If you don't, I won't be offended.
You will be offended?
Oh, I won't be offended.
You will be offended.
Okay, I'll just be like a little sound noise.
I can also give a plug for Shabbat. I mean, high holidays are nice and all, but you know what? There's something nice about knowing that even if it's not every Friday, there's a possibility that on Friday night we can put down whatever we've been carrying through the week, and we can come and be with some friends and part of the community and just do what the Jewish people have done for thousands and thousands of years. So definitely a plug for Friday nights. My name is Micah Lapidus. I am a rabbi. I live here in Atlanta. During the year, most of the time, I work at a Jewish school called the Davis Academy. Any alumni in the room? Hey, Matthew! It's so good to see you. Impressed. I haven't seen it's been at least 2 or 3 years, and he's wearing a mask, but I recognize those eyes anywhere. And I've been leading high holidays at Emory for I stopped counting it a decade. I think after a decade, it's kind of like I turned 42 on Wednesday. After it's like I just have another birthday. Doesn't really matter. So I think it's fair to say that this may be right now the most awkward high holiday experience any of us have ever had. So if you are feeling warm, if your glasses are fogging up like mine are, if you're wondering why on earth did you come here, these are all fair things to think and feel and be experiencing right now. What I would tell you is I wonder if awkward is, for our purposes, maybe a synonym for awkward might be intimate. So here we are with our masks, which are challenging, I think, to say the least. But also a gesture. I think someone is literally wheeling it over right now. So we've now seen it all.
Have sorrow will travel.
Yeah.
Exactly, yeah. That reminds me, I recently officiated a wedding where the couple's dog processed in wearing a tuxedo. It's not something I was expecting to see. intimate, right? We're wearing these masks as a gesture of our respect and regard for one another. We're making a personal sacrifice by doing that, so I think that's something that ultimately should bring us closer together. Typically on an Erev Rosh Hashanah, we might have maybe 30 or 40 more people in the room, which I think provides some sort of emotional security. You don't have to worry about if I'm looking in your section that I'm making eye contact exactly with you. But at the same time, I think this provides us an opportunity to consider the possibility of this being an intimate experience. And so that's something that, depending on where we are in life, I think that one of the byproducts of COVID, there's a lot of loneliness, there's a lot of alienation, there's a lot of distancing, and so our time together could feel awkward because of the very fact that it's an intimate gathering, and that we've all made a clearly conscious and intentional decision to be here. I'm not going to talk much longer, but I know, rabbis know a lot of stories. I do not. I know one story. And it's a story that I think is pretty much apropos for almost any moment in which we find ourselves. So I'm going to tell this story because I think it might help us all relate to this particular moment with a sense of humility and humanity. So I think this story exists in different religious traditions, secular traditions, doesn't matter. The version I know involves a peasant somewhere in Russia some time ago who spent many, many years saving up money so that he could buy a horse. Does anybody know the story yet? There are probably lots of stories that start with saving up money. So he works and works and works, breaking his back, working so hard, saves up money to buy a horse. He buys the horse. The day he's had enough money and he buys the horse is the best day of his life. He's overjoyed, he's thrilled, he finally has his horse, it's going to transform his life. Sometime later, he's riding his horse, unfortunately, gets thrown off of the horse, breaks his leg, has a debilitating injury. And so now, all of a sudden, this horse has gone from being a blessing to being a curse. And the day that he breaks his leg is the worst day of his life. He loses his livelihood. He doesn't know what his future has in store for him. It's Russia, so who knows what kind of health insurance he has. Then war breaks out, as often happened in those days, and the army comes through and is conscripting all the able-bodied men to come and fight in the Russian front. Because he has a broken leg, he doesn't go off to war, and he's spared, which is obviously, from his perspective, a good thing. Right? So now we're back to the horse being blessing. It's a curse. It's a blessing again. He's spared, although sometime after he realizes that all of his friends, his entire community was decimated by this war. He finds himself alone now because he stayed back. He's recovered fully. He's fine. But his friends, his neighbors, all the people who were part of his community have died in the war. And the story continues. There's another chapter and another chapter, I would presume. But I think the moral of the story is that we never know in the moment really what the significance of this moment is and how it fits into the story of our lives. And so, are we blessed? Are we cursed? Are we somewhere in between? What does this moment mean? I think to be human, we just lack the ability to know. And so we find ourselves somewhere in the middle of a story. We're trying to figure it out. And hopefully, these High Holy Days can be something that provide an opportunity to check in with our own stories, kind of see where we're at, and start to do some meaning making out of the experiences that we've had, out of the experiences of which we've been deprived, and out of the stuff of our lives. So with that, I think we'll turn it over to Taylor, and just Taylor, perhaps?
For this moment,
Okay,
but
Taylor.
before we welcome in the holidays and candles, Rabbi Micah, you might have not been counting how many years that you have worked at Emory Hillel, but I would like to invite up my esteemed CEO of the Hillels of Georgia, Elliot Hart, to join me. We at the Hillels of Georgia have in fact been counted, and it happens that it is actually quite a special anniversary this year.
Rabbi Micah was rather modest in saying that he stopped counting after 10 years. We haven't stopped counting. And this evening marks his bar mitzvah year, leading reform services at Emory Hillel. So, Rabbi, today you are a fountainhead. No, not actually a fountainhead. That's a different generation. But we are very appreciative that Rabbi has been with us for 13 years, especially this past year where I think the only thing consistent was the inconsistency of life. Rabbi Lapidus has been consistent for 13 years, inspiring generations of students, literally generations of students, during the high holidays, and being a friend to Hillel all throughout the year. And we're grateful for your presence and for leading our services. And because you're such a Grateful Dead aficionado, and to demonstrate our gratefulness, we actually have a Grateful Dead Chanukiah.
I'm truly heartwarming. Thank you. Oh my goodness.
In honor of your bar mitzvah year here in Hillels.
I just gave my speech though. Well, this is lovely. This will have a cherished place in my heart and soul. The last thing I will say is, at my last bar mitzvah, I have more hair. It's so sweet.
Thank you so much for your continued leadership. I'd also like to invite Emily Kerness
Emily
up
is
with
here.
me to
Excellent.
usher in
Okay.
our
Great.
Yom Tov with candles.
The rest of the service is probably going to fly by, so I encourage you, if you're waiting for some moment to really kind of settle in and start to do whatever it is that you came here to do, this would be a wonderful time to begin that.
Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kirishanu b'mitzvotav v'hadlik nefshei yom tov.
Amen. Thank you both for lighting these candles, a reminder of the light that exists in all these chagim. And Taylor, is Rabbi Llan here?
Right here.
Rabbi Llan is here, right on
I think he's
cue.
going to be speaking a little later at our
Yep.
bar spot, though. Or,
Okay.
sorry.
We're fully coordinated. Okay. Let's turn to page 12 in our High Holiday Machzor. We've got them in our lap. We might as well open them up. I will spare you the art history lesson if you've noticed any of the very creative and highly abstract art in the Machzor. If you have any theories about what it represents, I would definitely be happy to be illuminated. So let's do this reading just to warm up our voices. To everything there is a season and a time for every purpose under heaven. And now let's read together. This is the season of the soul, a time to rejoice, a time to reflect, a time to return, a time to gather around the table with loved ones and friends, a time for song and silence, for prayer and confession to open the heart, a time to retreat to our sanctuaries within, a time to renew the life and spirit of our community. This is the season of attentiveness, a time to notice what is unfolded and what was not, a time to regret, a time to forgive, a time to remember cherished dreams and high ideals embraced by reality. This is the season of hope, like mist rising at sunset, like dew descending at dawn. Our hopes beautify and nourish everything they touch. Our hopes make us partners in creation, pursuers of peace, people who aspire to a world of justice. This is the season of awe, when our eyes behold it, making feel blessed. When we turn toward each other, let us feel strength. When we seek the holy, may we find purpose, may we find courage, may we find love. It's an invitation as we read the Machzor to think about how these lines strike us now and how they might have struck us a year or 2 or 3 years ago, and to kind of explore the breach and sometimes the gap between our evolving understanding. When we turn to page 15, I'm actually going to invite Ellie to come back up because we're going to actually sound the shofar in a moment, which is very exciting. On page 15, we read the biblical passage, which gives us pretty much everything that we know about Rosh Hashanah from a biblical perspective. So it says there on page 15, Tiku b'chodesh shofar, Yisei l'yom chagenu, Yichot l'Yisrael hu mishpat le'Elohei Yaakov. At the new moon and full moon for our feast days, sound the shofar, for that is the law of Israel, the way of the God of Jacob. Hallelujah b'tekah shofar, praise God with the blast of the shofar. And now a blessing, Baruch atah Adonai, Shomea kol truat amo Yisrael berachamim. We can read any of this together, of course. Blessed are you in our lives, Adonai. You hear with love the shofar, true voice of the people of Israel. It's customary to stand when we hear the sound of the shofar, and so we'll do that. Yeah. Let's see if we can sit down or not. No, let's remain standing. That's a classic rabbinic faux pas, up and down. Okay, so we're going to turn now to page 20. There'll be some familiar prayers that follow for those who are kind of accustomed to the ebb and flow of the Jewish prayer service of any kind. And we'll start with Baruch Hu.
Listening to my prayers. Can you hear my voice? Can you understand? Am I awake? Am I prepared? Baruch Hu et Adonai, HaMevorach. Baruch Adonai,
Just take a moment of intention before we sing the words of Shema, breath, whatever we need to do to try to be centered, to try to be not only physically, but spiritually and otherwise present here in this time and space. Are you ready? We'll join together on page 26.
If it is your custom to remain standing for the Shema, please do so. If it's your custom to close your eyes, please do so as well.
Adonai Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Baruch Shem Kevod Malchuto, Le'olam Va'ed. Baruch Shem Kevod Malchuto, Le'olam Va'ed.
Now we can be seated. We'll chant the words of the Ve'ahavta in the moment, in the moment, yes, of course, in a moment as well. Ve'ahavta is found on page 28. I don't know if we all have taken a look at the meaning of this prayer, which comes from the book of Deuteronomy in a while, but as an educator, there's a line that certainly stands out to me. Veshinatam levanecha, teach all of these things to your children. And I think that's just a wonderful instruction and really at the heart and soul of the Jewish people. In the spirit of trying to break through some of that awkwardness, I wonder if anybody is willing to share. I'm going to assume that all of us are here because there was at least one person who fulfilled this mitzvah, who taught you as a child something that has led to you being here now. Maybe it was a parent, a grandparent, if we were blessed to have that kind of intergenerational family. Maybe it was a religious school teacher, a rabbi, a college professor. I don't know. But is anybody willing to just share maybe the first name that comes to mind when in terms of someone who taught you Jewishly or who had a hand in your Jewish upbringing that might kind of indirectly have led to be part of why you're here today. Mom? And was there something specific? Was it holidays? Was it particular teachings? Just a general sort of atmosphere? Uh-huh. You mean it wasn't just like something that you automatically wanted to do yourself? You're not alone. That's what that chuckle represents. Anybody else? Yeah.
My grandma, mostly because they couldn't practice Judaism in the Soviet Union, and so they kind of taught me that I have to make sure that I practice like now that I'm here.
Yeah. So that's a very Jewish example, transforming what could be kind of intergenerational trauma, right? We know that a particularly cruel expression of communism was the inability to practice the tradition. And so in your case, that led to a strong desire, obviously, to instill some sense of that in you. Awesome. Anybody else? It's a nice thing to think about. I mean, we're honoring these people, just even if we don't share that, just calling them to mind in this moment.
I had a very influential, like, Hebrew school, Sunday school teacher named Rachel Shea, who was just like the kindest woman I've ever met, and just was like so warm and so loving. She ended up doing like the synagogue, like women's presentation at my bar mitzvah. I like still keep in touch with her sometimes. She made a big impact on my Jewish education.
Awesome. I can tell you one other thing. If any of these people, even if it has been 5, 10, 15, or 30 years since you thought of them or spoken to them, if you send them an email on Wednesday night, I guarantee you that you will make their day. And that's a way of returning the kindness. If someone has, touched your life and helped you be a part of the Jewish community, they probably know that, but at the same time, it never hurts to be reminded of the way in which we impact one another in life. So let's chant the Hafta, and we'll continue on from there. Thank you for being open to sharing, and an important part of sharing is listening. So I appreciate that we did that together. Page 28. Flip over to page 34. We'll sing Micha Mocha now. Micha Mocha, of course, remembers a really important moment in the consciousness of Jewish people crossing the Red Sea. That moment may exist for us in various ways and forms in our own lives to think about the challenges that we face and the times in which we have kind of earned some measure of freedom from whatever it was that we were going through.
Okay, I am leaving Miriam.
COVID really, I think, took away from us was the ability to sing together. And so getting a little bit of that back with leading us is really a joy and a pleasure. We're going to continue with music on page 36, the Hashkivenu. If you went to a Jewish summer camp on the West Coast, you probably know this melody. If not, you'll be honorary member.
Hashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu l'shalom, l'shalom. V'ha'amidenu shalreinu l'chaim. Ufros aleinu sukat shlomecha, ufros aleinu sukat shlomecha. Shelter us beneath thy wings, O Adonai.
Guard us from all harmful things.
Guide us from all harmful things.
O Adonai.
Adonai.
Keep us safe throughout the night.
Keep us safe throughout the night, till we wake with morning's light.
Teach us, God.
Teach us, God, from right.
Amen, 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 amen.
Amen. Amen. Amen.
I'm very excited to call David Portnoy now to share some thoughts with us. I think about prayer, about personal prayer. It's really a wonderful opportunity for us to hear from him, to get some inspiration as we head into the center of the liturgy, which is called the Amidah. Anywhere you want.
So hey everyone, I'm a junior at Emory. I prepared like a few thoughts on prayer and kind of like what it means to me. So here goes. So it's been a while since my last in-person service, and honestly, like it really feels great to just be sitting and listening and reciting prayer like along you all. Prayer in its more traditional form isn't something I practice very ritually. I don't really find myself at synagogues very often, maybe as a product of my upbringing and my environment, but more so because I really do like feel connected spiritually to myself, even though I don't pray that often. And at the end of the day, prayer is really just a reflection of our actions, both in the sense that we need to first think about our actions, and then consider how we can act more ethically, virtuously, guiltlessly, and honorably in the future. Thus, we often phrase our petitions for strength through prayer as questions. But prayer to me is more conversational than inquisitive. My personal prayer is my discussion with myself at the end of each day, where I might go back and forth on the way that I approached a given situation. I might repent on some days, but I also won't hesitate to rejoice on those days where I feel like I've learned from my past prayers or conversations. In my conversations, I've also learned over the years that being grateful and being thankful for my life and health should also be a point of daily discussion. Every year I've learned more about myself and tried to embody righteous ideals, and I can comfortably say that I'm getting better year to year. As I stand here today, I recognize the importance of group prayer and the holiness of synagogue. It's a place where I can take my personal conversations as a step forward and learn to be more purposeful and more targeted with the way that I pray and just think about my daily life. My hope is that I can leave here today with ways that I can become more connected with my spirituality. And the notion that the new year is just another chance for me to continue my discourse with God. Thank you.
Okay. Let's give it. Thank you. Yep, beautiful. the same response, but put quite a bit out there. And I guess what I would say is that my wish for all of us is that we, if we were to sit down and have a cup of coffee, and someone would say, hey, tell me about your spiritual life, or tell me about what does prayer mean to you, or, I know you're Jewish, do you go to synagogue, why not, what do you do there? That we'd be able to offer kind of our version of some sort of rich description, some version of our story, our response to those questions. I think Judaism is less about what your response is, and more about the fact that, if asked by a friend, if asked by a colleague, if asked by a professor, if asked by yourself, that we're willing to enter into that conversation, and that we've given it some thought. And in the craziness and busyness of life, with so much going on in the world around us, such subtle matters often get put on the back burner or saved for another time. But David, I think probably my main takeaway from what you've said is that rather than neglecting those sorts of topics and considerations, if we really think about them, as we said about being grateful for health, it should be a matter of daily discussion and reflection. I mean, these things could actually be part of an array of tools that help us get through the world in which we find ourselves. So there's quite a bit there, and I appreciate that very, very much. And I'm sure others do as well. With these thoughts in mind, we'll turn to page 42. We're going to be rising as able for the Amidah. There are, on the High Holy Days, a couple of different melodies and things that are woven in, some different words. Every synagogue does them a little differently. We've kind of figured out a way to do them with some measure of familiarity here at Emory. I just invite everyone, come along for the ride, and we'll do the best we can. And we'll begin on page 42, Rising for this series. And then page 49, on top card goes be seated for a moment. All right, let's turn to page 74. If you are sad that we are skipping all those pages, you are welcome to choose your own. We're being mindful of the fact that these are less comfortable conditions, that a little bit goes a long way, that our being together counts for a lot, that dinner will happen at some point for many of us as well, and also that we have some folks who are joining us virtually, and so we're kind of just trying to take all of those things into consideration. We've never been a congregation that does every single word on every single page, but just sometimes folks wonder, well, why did we just skip 15 pages? And it's not because it's not important, it's because we are, weighing a series of considerations and assuming that everyone is taking some measure of ownership for their own work and their own experience. But we're going to turn to page 74, where we find a framing, a framework for understanding the Avinu Malkeinu prayer. This is an interesting prayer. This is an old prayer. It's not as old as some. It's a complicated prayer if you want it to be. It's got a lot of theological provocation that's a part of it. So there are all sorts of ways that we could relate to this. I'd be very curious to know how it relates to how someone who's majoring in gender and statistics would relate to the Avinu Malkeinu prayer, which is, in case those who don't know, Avinu is our father, Malkeinu is our king. So somewhat of a gendered approach towards God. But why don't we just read this on page 74? Avinu Malkeinu, strong. I'll read a paragraph and then you can read a paragraph and we'll take turns. Avinu Malkeinu, strongest of faith of generations before us. In exile, they proclaimed enduring hope. In the shadow of persecution, they affirmed a transcendent love and compassion. Ours is a different age, less confident and certain, more tentative in its trust. There are many who say to the works of their hands, you are our gods. But when our worship centers on our own creations, we feel less gratitude, more doubt and despair. This is the paradox of our spiritual lives. We grow smaller in self-exaltation, nobler when we reach for you. I'm going to remember that. We grow smaller in self-exaltation. I think of lots of times in my own life when that was true, and I think that if we turn on the TV, we're certainly overwhelmed with examples of people growing smaller in self-exaltation. On this night of return, let us find the humility to come close to you and open ourselves to your presence. For you are absent only when we fail to make room for you in our hearts, distant only when we turn away from you. Now, as others have done before us, let us overcome doubt and speak these words of affirmation. We call you Avinu, as a loving parent, forgive our wrongs and failings, accept us in our human frailty. We call you Malkeinu, as sovereign of our souls. Help us rise from our brokenness to build a world of shalom. To this vision we offer ourselves anew. So what we'll do in a moment, we'll rise. We'll imagine the ark that was wheeled by us a few minutes ago. Here, with its doors flung open, but we know that's in our hearts anyway. And I will read, you're welcome to read with me, the Hebrew. We'll then say the English. It's a little confusing because both the Hebrew and the English start with the words Avinu Malkeinu. We'll read through this list of remarks, and then at the end we'll sing that traditional folk melody that I'm sure is familiar to many of us, and to those that are not familiar, if you come back tomorrow, it will become increasingly familiar, and then we'll see where we find ourselves at the end of that journey. So let's rise. Avinu Malkeinu, Ein Lanu Melech Ela Ata. Avinu Malkeinu, Almighty and merciful, you alone are our sovereign. Avinu Malkeinu, Lema'ancha Rachem Aleinu. Avinu Malkeinu, for your sake, show us mercy. Avinu Malkeinu, Aseh Imanu Lema'an Shemecha. Avinu Malkeinu, act towards us as befits your name. Avinu Malkeinu, Shalach Refuah Shlema L'Cholei Amecha. Avinu Malkeinu, bring healing and wholeness to the ill among us. Avinu Malkeinu, Pra Ro'a Gezer Dinenu. Avinu Malkeinu, away the harshness of the decree against us. Avinu Malkeinu, Kovenu B'Sefer Ge'ulah V'Yeshua.
Avinu Malkeinu, inscribe us in the book of redemption and renewal.
Avinu Malkeinu, Zachrenu b'zichron tov lefanecha.
Avinu Malkeinu, remember our goodness and call it to mind.
Avinu Malkeinu, aseh l'ma'acha v'hoshi'enu.
Avinu Malkeinu, act for your sake and save us.
Avinu Malkeinu, shma kolenu.
Avinu Malkeinu, almighty merciful, hear our voice.
Avinu Malkeinu, chotenu lefanecha.
Avinu Malkeinu, be straight and sin before you.
Avinu Malkeinu, chamo avenu v'al uvalenu v'tachenu.
Avinu Malkeinu, have compassion on us and our families.
Avinu Malkeinu, kale dever v'cher v'ra'av me'alenu.
Avinu Malkeinu, halt this onslaught of sickness, violence, and hunger.
Avinu Malkeinu, kale kol tsar u'maskin me'alenu.
Avinu Malkeinu, halt the reign of those who cause pain and terror.
Avinu Malkeinu, kovenu b'sefer chayim tovim.
Avinu Malkeinu, enter our names in the book of life well with.
Avinu Malkeinu, chadesh avenu shana tova.
Avinu Malkeinu, renew us for year of goodness.
Avinu Malkeinu, chonenu ve'anenu en banu ma'asim aseh imanu tzedakah v'chesed v'hoshi'enu.
Avinu Malkeinu, almighty and merciful, answer us with grace for our deeds are wanting. Save us through acts of justice and love.
We'll sing together.
Avinu Malkeinu, Avinu Malkeinu. Anu Masi, Asei Manu, Tzedakah v'chesed. Asei Manu, Tzedakah v'chesed v'hoshi'enu. Avinu Malkeinu, Avinu Malkeinu, Avinu Malkeinu, Avinu Lahadeinu, Yein Banu Masi.
And we can be seated. Rabbi Llan, we're delighted that you joined us for Erev Rosh Hashanah and look forward to learning with and from you. If you don't see it.
Shana Tova, everybody. It's nice to see some familiar faces, a lot of faces that I can't quite tell what's behind the mask. It's nice to have you all here. My name is Rabbi Schwartz. I'm the new executive director here at Emory Hillel, and I'm really glad to be here with you tonight. I have to say this was my first time hearing Avinu Malkeinu to the guitar. It's pretty solid. Tonight at Kiddush and at other times in the service, we will say together the Shehechianu blessing. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, Shehechianu v'kiyimanu v'higiyanu lazman hazeh. Blessed are you, Lord our God, who has sustained us, who has kept us, and who has gotten us to this point. The problem with that blessing is that it somewhat, to some extent, devolves us, or absolves us of responsibility. I want to argue that that's not a good thing. We have a responsibility also to get ourselves to this point, to sustain ourselves, and to get us to where we are now. I was looking for inspiration for tonight, and I was reading the introduction to one of his commentaries on the Torah by the late Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sachs. And he recounts his meeting with the Lubavitcher Rebbe about 50 or so years ago. He's this sort of young, upstart philosophy student from Cambridge, I want to say. And he goes on a tour of America to learn about American Judaism. And if you want to learn about American Judaism in 1968, you got to go see the Lubavitcher Rebbe in Brooklyn. And the Lubavitcher Rebbe, as he was pressing Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sachs as to why he was not active in Jewish life on the campus he was on, says to Rabbi Lord Sachs, you do not find yourself in a situation, you put yourself in one. And if you put yourself in one situation, you can put yourself in another. And that, I think, is the point that we are at today as a community. We have been put into one situation as we continue to battle a pandemic. We put ourselves in situations to exacerbate or to make it better. And we have the choice whether to move from one situation to the other. The choice is very much with us. I want to share a couple of words with you tonight on that theme, on the idea of communal responsibility. We're all responsible for each other, as well as for ourselves. It's a balance between selfishness and responsibility for others. The Torah teaches us in Sefer Dvarim, a portion which we read, I think we'll read it this week, Parashat Nitzavim, says the following: Atem Nitzavim Hayom Kulchem Lifnei Adonai Elohim. You stand this day, all of you, before the Lord your God. Your tribal heads, your elders, and you, all your officials, so on and so forth. Everybody is responsible for receiving the law and for hearing the story and passing it down and having the experience. We're all responsible for passing it on to the next generation. We're all responsible for making sure that we as a society, we as a community, can continue to function. And there are various commentaries on this. One from the Midrash, which is sort of a series of stories and parables and laws that surround the Torah portion, writes, Torah was commanded to us by Moses. It is not for Moses alone that we hold the Torah, for our fathers too acquired it, as it says, the inheritance of the congregation of Jacob. Meaning, the Torah was given to Moses. The tradition was given to us, but we are all responsible for it. And so we're left with the question of what is our responsibility then, therefore? We're being given this, how do we pass it forward? So there's sort of a couple ways to do that. You could absolve yourself of responsibility completely and say, I'm not going to, this is not for me, I'm not going to do this. Or you can step up and say, it is my responsibility, what can I do moving forward? And we're now at a point in the world where more people are doing the first than the second. Early in the Torah, which we'll read in a few weeks, we see the story of Cain and Abel, Cain and Hillel. And the story goes, Cain and Abel, the children of Adam and Eve, they get jealous. Cain gets jealous of Abel because God likes Abel's sacrifice more, or at least that's the way it appears, and it reads the following. Cain said to his brother Abel, and then there's a pause, and when they were in the field, Cain set upon his brother Abel and killed him. The Lord said to Cain, where is your brother Abel? He said, I do not know. Am I my brother's keeper? And then he says, what have you done? Your brother's blood cries out to me from the ground. This is a clear repudiation from our tradition, that we are, in fact, our brother's keeper. Now, we all in this room right now are acting as our brother's keeper. We're wearing masks. I would say most of us, unless there's any younger children here, are probably vaccinated. We have a sense of responsibility not only for ourselves and our own health, but for the health of others. Rabbi Lord Sachs, later on in the book that I was reading about the Lubavitcher Rebbe, writes the following. Cain does not deny personal responsibility. He does not say, it wasn't me or it wasn't my fault. He denies moral responsibility. In effect, he asks why he should be concerned with the welfare of anyone but himself. Why should we not do what we want if we have the power to do it? I think too many people in our society are asking that question to themselves right now. Not enough people are asking, what can I do for the betterment of everybody else? It's a balance between personal needs and communal responsibility. And that's the question we need to be asking of ourselves, of our peers, of our family, of our friends, of our classmates, of our coworkers. Are we balancing this just right? It's really hard to do. I really don't like wearing this mask in here. Okay? I shaved today, but the amount of sweat on my face right now is really unpleasant. But here I am because I'm concerned about all of your health and my own health as well. We thought we could come outside, but now we have to go back inside, as it were. And I want to leave you with a moment of hope. I don't know if any of you read when you were children or were read to you the Frog and Toad stories. I want to be honest and say that I want to throw, which one is it? I forget always which is the one that drives me insane. Is it Frog or Toad who drives me insane? It's yes. Toad. They both drive me insane, but one of them drives me insane more than others. I want to say it's Frog. I don't know. One of them drives me more insane than the other. Okay. And someone wrote a little riff on Frog and Toad about that's relevant to the pandemic. It's as follows. It's called The Restaurant. Toad and Frog stood outside a French bistro. Inside, a sparrow, 2 dragonflies, and a field mouse were having dinner together. That should have been the first time they should have gone in with the field mouse in there. They looked like they were having a good time. Time to go in, said Frog. Toad and Frog did not move. Here we go, said Toad, dinner time. Toad and Frog still did not move. Toad said, Frog, I do not feel it is safe yet. I was about to say the same thing, said Toad. They were being cautious. It was a good, warm feeling. I hope that as we continue to be cautious, and we continue to enter the new year with really high hopes for what can be, we still have those warm, fuzzy feelings when we're cautious, when we're careful, when we're concerned about others. I promise you that if we can do that as a community, we'll be able to still gather here in person for holidays, for Shabbat, for Jewish learning, for Israel, whatever it may be, but it's only going to happen if we exhibit communal responsibility. We think not only about ourselves and our own needs, but about the needs of others. 5782, I hope, will be the year of thinking of others. Shana Tova. While I have your attention, just a couple of really quick announcements. So we'll have, for those of you who are staying for dinner, we'll have dinner here after services. It'll take us a few minutes to finish setting up. We discovered all of our paper goods are right in that closet back there. So it'll take us 10 minutes. Reform services will be back here in this room tomorrow morning at 9:30. And after which there'll be lunch at about 12:45 for those of you who are staying. Tomorrow at 5 o'clock at Lullwater Canyon, weather permitting, we'll have Tashlich, which is the ceremonial throwing away of our sins. And we'll meet both myself and Rabbi Jordan Bronig from the Emory Department of Office of Spiritual and Religious Life. We will lead the Tashlich ceremony, 5 o'clock at the main gates of Lullwater. If you are planning to be with us for Shabbat, please RSVP on the Hive by Thursday at 12 p.m. RSVPs for Yom Kippur meals especially are Monday at 3 p.m. And finally, we have a rabbinic intern, Alan Lipson from Hebrew College, who's actually right now leading our conservative service at Kerness Chapel. He'll be doing a couple of teachings this weekend, which I encourage you to join him for. The first will be Saturday around lunchtime. It'll go up on the Hive on Thursday morning. And then on Yom Kippur evening after Kol Nidre, they'll be teaching back here, both on topics related to the high holidays. And the last thing is that if you're a first-year student, on Monday night, we're going to have a freshman-only dinner. And then for all students, we will have a 10 days of awe program, the Aseret Yemei Tshuva, where we'll have some sort of sin-burning ritual involving the fire pit, weather permitting. So with that, I pass the service back to Rabbi Lapidus and Hannah. Shana Tova.
Shana Tova. Lots of good things happening. I definitely want to lift up and encourage 2 things that Rabbi Lon said. One, Tashlich is a wonderful tradition. As Jews, we love the outdoors, but we don't often allow ourselves to spend enough time out there doing Jewish things. Tashlich is the best of both worlds. Rabbi Lon also mentioned Alan Lipson. There was a lot of information thrown y'all's way, but I would encourage taking advantage of any of those study opportunities with Alan. I've had a chance to get to know him because on Yom Kippur, we're going to bring everyone together and conclude as an entire community, and he took the lead in planning that, and I've learned a tremendous amount from him. He said that services were tomorrow at 9:30. One big difference between Reform services and conservative services, aside from the fact that we get to skip a few pages, is if you come late to the Reform service, you'll have missed something, and it won't be coming back later. So definitely plan to be here at 9:30 if you're planning to join us. At the conservative service, a lot of the prayers come back at a later time. I don't know anyone who's ever been promptly on time to a conservative service in my life. Reform service, 9:30. Elliot is taking objection, but he knows that, right? And then the last thing is that Rabbi Lon said, make 5782 be the year of thinking of others. And so I think that's a perfect frame as we get ready to recite the words of the mourner's college. We're thinking of others, people who've been important to us, our teachers, our friends, our family, loved ones, people who we're remembering this moment. And if you wish to share a name out loud, you're certainly not required to do so, in honor to dedicate this prayer on their behalf. But we welcome sharing out loud of any names that anyone might wish to share this evening. So, anyone on this side that wanted to share?
Great capital.
Even for it. Come back in a minute in case anyone remembers. And on this side, anyone want to share a name? rise and join together. Yitkadal, Yitkadal, Shemera, Belmont, Raku, Tang, Yamli, Maku, Tang, Chayekon, Yamethon, Chayek, Kokes, Israel, Ba'ala, Isman, Karev, Yimru, Amen. Yeshmei, Rabah, Nevarach, Relam, Olay, Olay. Yifarach, Yishavach, Yifar, Yitramah, Yitnaseh, Yitzadar, Yitzaleh, Yitzalah, Shemei, Kushah, Rureku. Ve'ela, Ve'ela, Mikol, Yerchata, V'shirata, Shishvachata, V'nechamata, Da'amiran, Ve'amah, Yimru, Amen. Yeh Shalom, Avraham, Yishalaya, V'chaim, Aleinu, Ve'al Yisrael, Ve'imru, Amen. Say Shalom, Yirmah, Huya, say Shalom, Aleinu, Ve'al Yisrael, Ve'al Yoshvei Tevel, Ve'imru, Amen. Since you can only overcome in the memories before us. Amen. Be seated. Hannah, our outline says that now it's time for announcements. So if Rabbi Yvonne could come back and give the announcements again. I'm kidding. She's running. She's missing. I'm kidding. Taylor, I'm kidding. You're fine. I'm kidding. That was amazing. Okay, it was rabbinic. I have one announcement. I want to thank David again for his thoughtful remarks. I want to let you know that one of the reasons why many reasons why I come back to Emory, Hillel every year for High Holy Days, it's hearing from students like David. There are many opportunities to share thoughts. They can be fully written out. They can be stream of consciousness. We've had free verse poetry. We've had all sorts of creative expression from members of the extended Marcus Hillel, Emory Hillel community. It does not need to be something that you spend hours and hours working on. And so if you have something to say, or if you want to decide that you have something to say, please just let me and Taylor know. I would be delighted to incorporate as many of your voices, sharing as much as people feel inclined to do so. So please, let's lower the bar towards realizing that we all have something to teach and all have something to share. And let's consider being generous with whatever insights or questions or sensibilities we have during this critical time in our lives and in the life of the Jewish community. So that is a heartfelt invitation, please. And in terms of heartfelt, I think that our prayers for peace should always be heartfelt. And so we'll end with Oseh Shalom this evening, and then we'll do another Shana Tova. Let's make this prayer heartfelt.
Oseh Shalom V'Roma.
Oseh Shalom Aleinu. Oseh Shalom V'Roma. Oseh Shalom Aleinu. Oseh Shalom V'Roma. Oseh Shalom Aleinu. Oseh Shalom. Oseh Shalom. Shalom Aleinu. Ve'al Yisrael. Oseh Shalom. Oseh Shalom. Shalom Aleinu. Ve'al Yisrael.
Shalom
V'Roma. Oseh Shalom Aleinu. Oseh Shalom V'Roma. Oseh Shalom Aleinu. Oseh Shalom V'Roma. Oseh Shalom Aleinu. Oseh Shalom. Oseh Shalom. Shalom Aleinu. Ve'al Yisrael. Oseh Shalom. Oseh Shalom. Shalom Aleinu. Ve'al Yisrael.
Shana Tova, Hannah. Shana Tova, everyone. Let's have a wonderful Rosh Hashanah and High Holy Day season. And if our paths don't cross again, I just wish for you everything good and sweet and wonderful in the upcoming year. For you, your loved ones, and for all of us, may it be a good year. But hopefully we'll get to spend some more time together. I know Hannah and I will be spending more time together, which is awesome. So to be continued, Shana Tova. This is the best gift I think I've ever received.
Yes.
it.